Welcome everyone to the third Wednesday of the month Neuro Support Group. This is for Parkinson's and stroke. This is hosted by Connectability. Thank you, Sheila, for hosting the presentation, and sponsored by AQTS Home Health. AQTS Home Health is a licensed and certified home health agency providing skilled nursing, physical therapy, OT, speech therapy in the homes, specializing in managing the neuro cases like Parkinson's. We cover San Antonio and surrounding areas, and we are now in Corpus Christi too. And we welcome everybody, new participants, and I know Dr. Guido is international, and we've got everybody in the whole state of Texas and maybe outside, especially the Corpus Christi area. My name is Melinda Rodriguez. I am a physical therapist by trade, and I'm also a director of business development for AQTS Home Health. I just want to remind everyone, next month, September 15, our next presenter is a lawyer, Brennan Bose, specializing in elder law, and his topic will be Estate Planning 101, what you need to know to make sure your affairs are in order. So knowledge is power. That's what we do here every month. So without further ado, I know we've got a very full plate, and this presentation is very interesting. Got a lot of participants today. So without further ado, I would like to present a very known, a very successful and accomplished speaker for today, Dr. Ernesto Hugo Guido. Dr. Guido is originally from El Salvador, Central America. He graduated from the Medical School National University. Subsequently, he completed his training in internal medicine. He came into St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri, where he did further studies in internal medicine. From there, he went to Texas and Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, where he completed his neurological training, passed the test, American Board Certified in Neurology and Psychiatry. He has been in private practice in Corpus Christi since 1977, currently holder of several certificates in nutrition, and that's why we've got this topic today, including nutrition and wellness consultant, sports nutritionist, holistic nutritionist, weight management nutritionist, and recently certificate of the science of anti-nutrients in food, completing the courses to become nutritionist master with the AFPA of United States of America. Holder of a certificate of Institute of Integral Medical Qigong and Tai Chi, of a Tai Chi Easy Practice leader. So maybe next time that will be our topic. Recently has taken a job with Spawn Trinity Clinic, Christus Spawn in Corpus. He is a medical director of Memory Disorder Center, also medical director of AQTS Home Health. Active member of the multiple medical neurological organizations, including AAN, American Academy of Neurology, Texas Neurological Society, and Alzheimer's Association, and has spent significant amount of time providing educational neurological conferences to the public, medical community, making emphasis in the body, mind, soul connection, and alternative medicine. Without further ado, I would like to present Dr. Guido.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. First of all, I wanted to thank AQTS for keeping up on the public awareness and help in the brain health. They have been an excellent organization on that. But first of all, I wanted to congratulate whoever is listening to me in this presentation, because that means you guys are taking your brain to the gym to do some exercises, to practice what we call in neurology neuroplasticity, which is the capacity of the brain to make new connection So I really appreciate you to be listening to me. That is also helping me because I'm also practicing my neuroplasticity, trying to learn more, research more. So this is an extremely complex program. I will try to be as explicit as I can. But remember, all this type of conference, the main goal is education. The main goal is for you to be educated yourself and push yourself into trying to find out more about particularly nutrition. These are the takeaway points briefly. We try to make you to understand our nutrient from water to the new one, the phytonutrient, and about what are the critical food of our brain. I would like to introduce you about the concept of antioxidant, prebiotics, probiotics, and antibiotic, because this is a significant issue with significant amount of confusion and misinformation. And I'll tell you, I have been dealing and talking this subject for at least 10, 12 years, and there is still quite a bit of confusion, even in the medical field. Even our colleagues, they are still kind of confused. So please stay with me, and I will try to be as much as explicit as I can about these complex issues. Number one, there is no way to talk only about nutrition and without telling you that there's so many other circles and affairs that you need to be also dealing with in order to achieve the full mental health wellness, to achieve the full happiness and all that that wellness that we need to be functioning well. So there is so many circles that you can see in this slide. A briefly introduction, as a neurologist, you may be thinking, boy, why Dr. Guido is talking about nutrition, being a neurologist? Well, I have been really dealing with so many neurological issues that are so closely related to our nutrition. And I realized about 10 years ago that nutrition was so critical in all our patients. So I started to educate myself, and it was about maybe 12 years ago that I started to give conference in the neurogastronomy and all these connections that we have between our food and our brain. This slide is basically to remind us about the extensive vascular nutrition that we have in our brain. As you can see, 20% of the oxygen is being gone to the brain, and about 25% of the glucose is utilized by our brain, because it's glucose and oxygen the two most critical food stuff that our brain needs. So we are going to be frequently talking about our endothelium, our endothelium system. And I did have the opportunity to write an article recently in a medical journal about how important is the endothelium vascular system, particularly now in our situation with COVID and other viruses, how important it is for us to keep a very healthy endothelium. So now we're going to be talking about antioxidants throughout our presentation. And I wanted for you to have a little glimpse of a little bit understanding exactly what we're talking about. Antioxidant is basically a molecule that is restless, a molecule that an atom that is in need of another electron, and that keep moving and jumping around in your vascular system and your tissues. And when it keep jumping around, keep stealing that electron from other cells, from membranes, from your DNA. And in doing so, what we call the free radicals are the one that cause significant damage in your health. And that is what that make us to be old. That is what give us our gray hair. And that is what really making our wrinkles. But there is some ways for us to minimize that degree of damage of the free radicals. We are born with a very, very good amount of soldiers, a good amount of enzymes, glutathione, and some other enzymes that make us to deal with the free radical very well. But once we're getting older, and once we are getting exposed to so many free radicals in our life, the pollution, the food that we eat, the medication that we are eating that do cause more free radical, we need help. So that is where we need those soldiers, the antioxidants like the vitamin E, like the vitamin C, like the carotenoids, all those things that we may get in our food, particularly when we are dedicated to our veggies and to our food. I thought that because we're going to be dealing with people who may be watching us with significant diabetic issues, this slide just concentrate in the circle of diabetic complication. When we eat any food, particularly food that you are toast, that you are produced with high temperature, like buffalo wings, like French fries, you happen to produce a substance that we call advanced glycosylation product, AGEPS. That advanced glycolysis product are significantly toxic to our endothelium system. And they are the one who cause your renal problems, your leg to be amputated, your eyes to have the retinal diabetic vasculopathy, and all those issues. So I wanted for you to keep this in mind. The more bad food that you eat, you are going to create more glycation and product and more damage to your beautiful endothelium system. And diabetic population, unfortunately, are a significant higher risk for the COVID virus to have more damage because their endothelium system is significantly weak. This is just a brief slide about how or what is behind the production of atherosclerosis. And doctors have been talking about a bad cholesterol and a good cholesterol. HDL supposed to be a good cholesterol, the one that tried to grasp the LDL, the bad cholesterol, and take it to the liver and try to release there without doing any damage. But when you have more LDL, which is supposed to be bad cholesterol, that has a tendency to get oxidized by our free radicals and get deposited into the arterial wall, and that causes the thrombosis and the subsequent stroke. Well, this is just a brief slide about the small circulation, our endothelium system in our brain that do cause that progressive occlusive changes. And to your right side, you can see the small opening, the small holes in your brain. And that, as a neurologist, we call that lacunar stroke or lacunar infarct. That, unfortunately, frequently, you don't have any symptoms. Maybe a little bit of dizziness, maybe a little bit of headache, or maybe a little bit of a problem with your balance. And then until you get an MRI, you see all this hole in your brain. You say, my goodness, what happened to me? Well, that is the classical findings and radiological findings for lacunar stroke being related to what we call vascular dementia and being a risk factor for all different type of dementia like Alzheimer's or frontal temporal dementia, what have you.
Oh, okay. What I'd like to ask you about is the mask that we have to wear. Is that really protecting us, or do we lose oxygen by breathing through a mask all day?
And even politicized, and it's a very difficult issue, but there is plenty of science-based fact that the mask is really critical and very important. No, does not restrict your oxygen. we always have plenty of oxygen. There's no problem with that. I can assure you on that.
Okay, thank you.
So,
I didn't understand what the endothelium is.
okay,
What is that?
okay. The endothelium system is that layers of cells that we have in our arterial and veins wall. The wall is made of those cells, and that is our endothelium. Those cells are very critical, and they are functioning through some different chemicals, in particularly the famous nitric oxide. The nitric oxide is very famous because it's immense, is critical for erectile dysfunction. The Viagra makes the nitric oxide to be better, but nitric oxide is so important in some other issues, particularly in the endothelial system, that wall that cover our veins and arteries. So we're going to be talking a bit more later.
Are UBOs related to these strokes?
The UBO are very tiny lesions that are mainly related to microvascular changes. And we see that in many situations. The most frequent situation that I see as a neurologist is people who had repetitive traumatic brain injuries or even minor injuries, number one. Number two, migraine patients, they do have that type of a little minor thing. Diabetic person, they have all that UBOs type of findings. People with diabetes, they do have that, but maybe the beginning of problem with the endothelium, and maybe the beginning of a subsequent development of a small lacunar infarct. But it's a very interesting finding, and it's always, it's been identified as some issue with circulation in your endothelium. It's very important to find out exactly what's going on. Is your homocysteine low level elevated? And do you need to take some methylfolate for that, or your baby aspirin, or have you? That, of course, is another more extensive issues to discuss. Okay, we need a whole nutrition. When I went through my training on holistic nutrition, that opened up to my person and myself and my patients so many things, so many new things that, I'll be honest with you, my colleagues, my professional doctors, sometimes they don't have much time in go into really a holistic nutrition. The first thing that I wanted to briefly mention is about how important the water is. We cannot underestimate that critical part of our nutrition. And it's so critical that many people that do complain of dizziness, back pain, fatigue, they do not realize that the only problem that they have is that they are not drinking enough water. As we're going to be talking later on. And the problem with that is that after we reach our 50th or 60th birthday, that important reflex of thirsty started to go away. You are no longer like a teenager that says, I need water, I'm feeling thirsty. You don't have that reflex no more. So you think that you're okay, but you are restricted on that critical liquid that you need to drink at least 2 to 2.5 liters of fluids per day, dividing in different fluids. So we are going to be talking a little bit more on that, but I wanted for you to keep, please, that in mind. And the replacement of fluid of water is becoming even more critical after I became aware of something beautiful that happened when you're sleeping. When you are deep sleeping, in my recent talk about the mystery of sleep, we discovered that actually we don't, but there is a physician, a Danish physician Dr. Maiken Nedergaard, she discovered that when we're sleeping, we open up some channels in our brain where more fluid and more water goes around your neurons, and you clean your brain during the night, including removing the amyloid proteins, which is the protein that cause Alzheimer's and other things. So another reason for you to be well hydrated. The vegetarian, either vegan, or following a plant-based diet, we had the great benefit, like me, and I follow a plant-based diet, that we are taking a lot of fluid in our veggies, in our fruit. So part of our hydration is already there with our type of nutrition. Let's talk our beautiful fruit and apple. And I wanted for you to pay attention to this particular slide, because this is going to really involve the summary of many of our talk. This is a holistic way to evaluate our nutrition. When you take an apple, if you are already on meditation and you wanted to eat or find mindfulness, you think about the apple and go back 9 to 10 months and the apple started to generate and then come into your mouth, you started to dare to have a good type of take the food, good nutrition way to get the food. But I wanted to mention on the humble apple is the amount of chemicals, of vitamins, of phytonutrients that is in there. And that you are not going to be saying, well, apple has quercetin, I'm going to take the quercetin and peel, and that is going to be okay. Never, ever, you are going to do that. And that is what we call reductionistic approach in nutrition, meaning that people started to take supplement, thinking that in that way they are going to have a good nutrition, but that is not really the case. You had to take the whole enchilada with you. You had to eat the whole universe of your apple, and that is with everything. You had to eat your grape even with the seed. You had to eat your orange with all the fibers and all that immense combination of phytonutrients, because that is the way how they work. Dr. Roy Lewis in the 1980s, that was working with my famous mentor, Dr. Colin Campbell, he decided to investigate in the apple the vitamin C. Guess what? They discovered that really there is not such only vitamin C, but there is a lot of vitamin C-like chemical compounds. So if you are going to be taking only vitamin C from a pill, and do you think that you're going to be taking the vitamin C that is in the apple? Forget it, because this is different. The apple is working in your system, in your body, following a team approach, combination of many enzymes, combination of vitamins, combination of magnesium or what have you, that is making the nutrition very healthy. So when we are going to talk about nutrition, there is no question that everything starts in our mouth. And our mouth is the part of our body, our digestive system, where all our food is kind of started to get into action. And it's going to, our saliva started to introduce amylase and so many other digestive enzymes that started to make our food to be better. And there's something beautiful in our mouth that I want to mention again, talking about our endothelium. There is something in our mouth, behind our tongue. There is a nest of bacteria that we call Neisseria, that when you eat food that contain nitrate, that bacteria convert that nitrate to nitrite, and that one goes into your stomach, into your gut, convert into nitric oxide. Bingo. Our endothelium system started to get reinforced in our mouth in the way that we eat, and the way that we really take care of our mouth, because now you are taking pure Listerine in your mouth. Believe me, you are having some damage there. What type of paste you use, you may have some damage in there too. So you have to be very careful. People who chew gums have to be careful to chew the gums that do not have the sugar, normal sugar. Maybe if you are going to be chewing gum, chew the one that has xylitol. This is the one that is non-sugar element. It may help to your bacteria in your mouth. But anyhow, I thought that was very interesting to start to our discussion in our nutrition in our mouth. Oh, by the way, chew your food. Doctors tell you chew it at least 20 to 25, but I have been counting my chew, and probably I do it more than 30 times, because when you chew, the more that you chew, the more enzyme productions and mixture and your bacteria work much better. So please remember that when you eat. Well, we have a division of our food, the type of nutrient. This slide is the slide about that being extended by the American Academy of Nutrition, and it's in our website of the government, and it's still there. With time, with years, we have learned that we disagree with many of these food. I want to mention some, but basically, this type of nutrition that the government sponsor is that you had to have about 20% to 30 to 35% of your fat. You had to have about 10 to 30% of your proteins, and you had to have the most of your food, the carbohydrate, which are the most important food stuff in which you subtract ATP, which is the atom of energy. That's the one that the athlete had to take when they keep running and jogging and biking to be on shape. The question is, which type of carbohydrate do you have to take? And years back, about 20 years ago, the government said, hey, we had to restrict the fat and you had to take a lot of carbohydrate, and people started to eat a lot of French fries, a lot of rice, a lot of white bread, and guess what? Diabetes and all the degenerative diseases went up because they were eating the wrong carbohydrates. I disagree in the meat, in the cheese, in the type of milk. In my research and my personal experience, I would like to substitute those things with plant-based protein and still taking some animal protein, but in a limited amount. We may talk about it a little later on. The micronutrients are the carbohydrate, fat, and protein. And the micronutrients are the water, our vitamins, the mineral, and phytonutrients that some have listed in there. One of the most common diet that is being talked about. There is so many diets, and there's some diets that pass and never come back again. And you probably know there is an extensive amount of diet from, ketogenic diet, Atkins diet, Palm Beach diet, what have you, many diets. But the most studied diets are the one I'm going to mention to you, that there is a significant research on that. Perhaps the most extensive one have been the Mediterranean diet, which is a diet that they encourage. You can see in the lower base, they encourage significant amount of fruit, veggies, the rye bread with the grain bread, and then you have the next stage of seafood, and then less and less the meat, animal product meat. And they include the wine. We may talk a little bit more about that. I have been researching that extensively. And of course, the hydration, and more important in the Mediterranean diet, is that they do quite a bit of exercise. They do quite a bit of socializing, and they do quite a bit of exercises. So there is those issues that when people who follow the Mediterranean diet, they are usually very active people, and therefore they turn out to have less dementia, less degenerative problems. But if I am going to put a little one in your brain about for prevention of a stroke and prevention of any other degenerative problem is your fibers, and more fibers and more fibers. Of course, there are some people who don't do well with so many fibers because they have more constipation or what have you, but the majority of us handle the fibers very well. There have been plenty of studies that the more fibers that you eat in your diet, your microbiome, which is our friends in our tummy that we're going to be talking in the next few minutes, they love to eat the fibers, and therefore they are more productive in making your vitamins and making your neurotransmitters and making so many other things, connection with your brain, as we are going to learn in the next few minutes. So another important point on the fibers and the diet of fibers is that they are usually rich in potassium. And remember, again, going back to your endothelium system, potassium, a little bit more potassium than sodium is very critical in make your nitric oxide system work much better. So there is, you're eating a lot of salt, and the majority of food have so much salt and sodium, you are not doing a good service to your microbiome and your endothelium. So need to restrict your sodium. And then Harvard University and Johns Hopkins University and multiple universities, and you can research this very easily, has been mainly working on the Mediterranean diet, the big group of people with Parkinson's disease and people with Parkinson's disease, a big group of people with dementia and people without dementia. All those studies has shown a very medicine-based evidence that do help. And so I'm not going to emphasize that anymore. There's plenty of bibliography in the public domain that you can go in there. But perhaps the most of the recent diet that we have been searching into and looking into is that we call the mind diet. The mind diet is the combination of something from the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet. Now, the DASH diet is one of the diets that is supposed to help you in your hypertension. And again, it's very designed to help you in making more healthy endothelium, more healthy nitric oxide, preventing so much sodium, preventing food that may drop your LDL in your endothelium. So the DASH diet. So they combine the DASH diet with the Mediterranean diet. You know, you're getting the best one from both of them, and they have found significant changes in the overall health, particularly in person who is Parkinsonism and dementias. I'm kind of fixed on the endothelium, as you can see, because I think that is really a critical part on our diet, as well as our microbiome. And I know that some of my friends that are listening to me, when we were talking recently about chocolate, and I told them, hey, chocolate, you know, you really get chocolate. That's really good for your bacteria in your brain. No kidding. Oh, I'm craving for chocolate. Wait a minute. What type of chocolate were we talking about? Okay, we are talking about the chocolate that comes from organic cocoa and that has at least 75 to 90 or even 100% of cocoa. I am not talking, I'm sorry, about that chocolate has a lot of sugar, a lot of milk, and a lot of other things, processed food. I'm not talking about that. But chocolate is beautiful food. It's one of the superfood that contain what we call flavonoids, significant amount that make your endothelium system to work better, and also your microbiome, our trillion of friends that we have in our gut, they love it. Picture here of my papaya tree, and some of the things that can help your endothelium are your grape, your wine, green tea. So the soybean derived food is one of the superfood that I have every day. Something that comes from soybean is always in my table. And I really encourage that so much because again, helps so much to your microbiome and to so many other metabolism in your system. And your veggies, as we were talking about before, your veggies rich on some nitrate that give your bacteria in your mouth the beginning of the production of your nitric oxide that help and reinforce your endothelium. And for the last 5 years or so, we have been talking more about the phytochemical or phytonutrient. Those are those chemicals, those isoflavones, those polyphenols, those resveratrol, all those type of chemicals that do help to fight our free radical. Phytochemicals are so now important in our diet, and you will be hearing about, talking about them in most of the nutritional talk. And that is, they are the food that are rich in phytochemical, called phytochemical, are our fruits, our veggies, our grains, our quinoa, our chia, our nut. So if you, make a habit of incorporating those food into your diet, you really do not need to be a vegan or a vegetarian, but try to make an effort to make that part of your lifestyle and try to eat the rainbow, try to eat the colors, the greens, the red, the yellow. And I bet you you're gonna be better. The Mediterranean diet in particularly has been studied in many occasions. One of the most frequent studies done in Italy and in Harvard University is to check and see how much your brain changed with diet. Okay, well, is there any changes in your brain? So they put people with the Mediterranean diet for several months, and then they put a group of people who follow our classical Western diet, which I call toxic diet because it's killing millions of people. Even so, organizations cannot really tell you much about that because they need to be selling your meat, your milk, and things like that. I'm sorry to say that, but in the slide that you can see there that that there is some changes in a very critical part of your brain that has to do with your memory and what we call the hippocampus, a part of the brain that is close to your temporal lobe. The hippocampus became a little bit bigger comparing with when you are in a Western diet. I mean, even so, it's a little bit, I'll take it because that's been millions of neurons that are extra for you to use. And you can, I don't know, you're able to see, but you can see the ventricle size that are much healthy on the people who are on the Mediterranean diet. The Western diet has bigger ventricle. Anyhow, there is a significant studies on this part, Sometime if you can ask to some neurologists, they may think that there's some controversial issues because maybe they say the people who are Mediterranean diet, they are more prone to do more exercises, they are following different, better lifestyle than the people that are on Western diet and so forth. So there may be some other issues. So there may be some contradiction, but overall, we know that you do have changes in your brain. Like when you meditate, we know that when you meditate every day, 1 or twice a day, your brain change, and there's beautiful studies on that. Maybe I am having some secondary wishes over here because I have been on a plant-based diet for a while, trying to fight some medical issues and trying to advise my patient on that. I think that the real revolution in diet and nutrition have been already here for several years. And we are trying to encourage people to do a plant-based food nutrition style. We really do not call diet. We wanted for you to incorporate as much our fruit, our veggies, our grains, our legumes, our nuts. There is some other more aggressive diet in, in people, vegetarian, for example, that's different type of vegetarian, or vegan diet. The vegan diet is a very philosophically oriented diet. They are completely against any damage to any animal. People who are vegans, they don't want to even touch honey because they think that the animal kingdom had to be respected in a different way, but it's a different story. This is just something food for thought for you to digest. About more than 90% of the animals that you eat are raised in industrial setup, factory farm. So they are suffering a lot. And the agriculture consume about 55% on the water, which is so much needed right now. And the animal protein production requires so many fuels and many energies and so forth. So many things that you may just think about whenever you decide at least to decrease a little bit the amount of the animal related food product. This has been one of my mentors that have been attending conference with him. And his book, his book that made him famous was the China study about 25 years ago, when he called the attention about the proteins, animal protein, increasing, enhancing carcinogenic process. Now we know, not the World Health Organization is already telling us meat produced has a chance to increase cancer. But anyhow, these are some of the statements of Dr. Colin Campbell that I respect so much. Okay, before I will go into our microbiome, our friendly bacteria, our trillions of friends that we need to feed. So when you go to a nutritionist, tell them, hey, I need to feed trillions of friends. And one nutritionist talked to my patient, what the hell, you're gonna be feeding trillions? Well, we're talking about our bacteria in our gut. So before we go into our microbiome, which is the name that we use to deal with our gut bacteria, any questions?
I love eating Indian food, the curry and the turmeric. Are there any health benefits for eating curry with regards to Parkinson's and dementia?
That has been one of the very much studied product. Those type of food that you're talking about, the turmeric, ginger, and all those type of spices are very, very rich in antioxidant. And in particularly, the one that have been studied the most is the turmeric. That is, I use that very frequent on my food. Has a tremendous amount of anti-inflammatory effect, particularly on the brain, and has been proved in significant studies that have some tendency to improve the potential that cognitive issues. They are really recommended as long as you don't have any particular problems or side effects, that you don't have any inflammatory bowel syndromes or ulcerative colitis, that sometimes that can give you trouble. Yeah, that is extremely welcome food.
Yes, I would like to know your opinion about this healthy dessert that everybody's talking about in this time, where you can use vegetable milk and gluten-free and sugar-free. Do you think that is this possible that this kind of dessert may help in our health?
If somebody is telling you about a diet that is sugar-free, well, of course, that's not true, because you know that all the food is sugar. If they don't, they have fructose that, or different type of carbohydrate that get converted in sugar. But the question here is the type of food that has a low glycemic index. If you look into the food that have very low glycemic index, then that has the less amount of sugar or glucose, the one that's gonna give you trouble. And for example, if you eat a white bread, and a lot of people are still eating that, and if you eat rice, and you eat a lot of potato, things like that that are very highly the glycemic index, they are gonna give you trouble. But instead of getting the rice, you started to learn how to cook the quinoa. Beautiful quinoa is just, I love it because it's one of the superfood. Or you started to eat the soybean related product that is a lower glycemic index. That is, you're gonna still continue taking your carbohydrate and of course sugar, but with more nutrients, more phytonutrients that the different type of processed food that you may be eating in some diets.
Okay, and what about this sugar substitutes like monk fruit and
The sugar substitute, we initially saw in the initial studies and research that it was just really passing by in, through your stomach, into your intestine, and doesn't get absorbed. Guess what? We had discovery, and there's again plenty of studies in the public domain, that those type of substitute kind of mess up your microbiome. And your microbiome ended in working in favor of gaining weight. We're going to be talking very soon. So that's something that I do not recommend.
Dr. Guido, just for everybody's knowledge, would you just do a brief description of the Mediterranean diet and the Western diet? I know it's just it's a huge difference, but it's a little difference.
Yeah, the Mediterranean diet that you can see is started to be more common in the Mediterranean countries, in the places that we call the blue zones, ZONES. The blue zones are all these different parts of the globe on our earth that are following kind of like a Mediterranean diet and plant-based diet. There's one in Costa Rica, there's in California, there's in Japan, there's in Italy and Greece and so forth. And they make emphasis, of course, in grain, veggies, and plant and fruit. You know, they make emphasis on that. And they also make some emphasis on the seafood. And I have something to say on that. Those seafood in those places, perhaps they were probably healthier before, but nowadays I have a lot of questions in my research about a very healthy food, a very healthy seafood. You need to be careful in your fish that you're eating. Don't eat a farm common fish. Try to eat the best fish that come from the wild. Salmon from Norway and Alaska is still one of the best ones still in my diet from there. And then they are talking about the olive oil. They say, well, the olive oil is probably one of the important part of the Mediterranean diet. Perhaps so, because in the way that they probably cook the food, and maybe they add and they don't overheat the olive oil, because if you are overheating the olive oil, oh my goodness, you are adding a lot of, you know, free radicals to your diet. So you have to be very careful. Do not overheat that thing. And if you don't want it to gain weight, the olive oil has packed calories, but has a lot of phytonutrients, a lot of polyphenol. So they think that that is part of the good diet in the Mediterranean diet. Then they talk about the 2 to 3 glasses of wine per day. The rich wines on resveratrol. Resveratrol is one of the polyphenols that help again in our, you know, epithelium, you know, epithelium system, and they think that that's part also the benefit of the diet. But I believe that again, the amount of meat, if they eat meat, they make emphasis in a very very clean meat, not come from nutritional fed cows with a lot of added pharmaceutical chemicals and what have you. It's a meat, a lean meat, different lean meat. And then those people also, they don't use many cars. They have to use their bike, they walk distances, they have a lot of network, social relationship. And those issues are very critical to that probably, you know, make a difference in that particular lifestyle. Western diet, oh my goodness, what can I tell you? It's tough. It's a tsunami. People go to the fast food places. I see lines when I'm going back from my work and I pass through one of the main stores that sell you the buffalo wing. It's about 2 or 3 blocks of people waiting for the buffalo wing, which is so bad for your diet. Excessive amount of sugar, excessive amount of advanced glycation product, free radicals, a lot of fat, a lot of glucose, a lot of things that people love it. And I have nothing against that. But and they are probably following that standard of life that their parents have, and they will continue. And they will follow in that standard of medical life of having a big scar in their chest because they have already bypassed in the 40s. So that is their standard of life. That's the way that they had to live. They think they will continue to live. Hey, there's different ways. There is a different attitude. There is different lifestyle. You don't have to have all those things. You have to continue in being your own doctor yourself and educate yourself, because there is a lot of things that you had to learn, and then you have a lot of things that you had to discover. And I wanted for you to encourage to do that. You had to change. You had to be different. Sure, of course. Very interesting question. To start with the water, we in our 60s or 70s, we do not need to reduce the amount of water. We still need to continue in taking the same amount of our teenagers, okay, because that's very important. But we know that our enzymes, we know that our gastric enzymes in our tummy do change with age. Therefore, you know, you have to have some adjustments on your diet. Do I have to eat a small amount frequently, 3 or 4 times? Can I afford to go into a restriction diet, like one day and clean my intestine and do only some smoothie or some other, you know, less difficult product to digest? Now we know that the proteins are the most difficult part of your the food to digest, and that is where we're talking about decreasing the amount of protein animals. It still had to be there, particularly at our age, because we need very critical amount of amino acid, particularly the essential amino acid. In some person who cannot eat much protein-related food at their age, I sometimes recommend some supplement with essential amino acid. But there's something interesting also in our stomach when we are going older, more than the 50 or 60. There is a chemical in our stomach that we call the intrinsic element, the intrinsic factor in our stomach that started to decrease. The intrinsic factor in our stomach is very critical for our vitamin B12. And we usually do not absorb well or enough vitamin B12. And that is why the vitamin B12 is one of the supplements that we had to seriously consider and taken as a supplement, particularly if you are considering a plant-based diet. Also, we started to have a decrease in the production of vitamin D. Even so, you go to expose to your sun, that, you know, to expose your skin, the metabolization of production of vitamin D, you still may not produce enough. So most of our patients, particularly those with cognitive issues, I always put them on a supplement with a vitamin D3. And so the amount of ATP, or the energy producing the reactions in your body, also decrease. So, but you may not need to be doing so much exercise, but you still have enough ATP in your system to continue and living a normal life and normal activity. Yes, there is some changes, there's some metabolic changes, and everybody is a different person. Myself, I do not have many issues in getting most of my food plant-based, but I know that there's a lot of people who have problems. The people who are diabetic may have some issues. People who have inflammatory bowel disease have some issues, colitis, some other issues. So you have to really tailor your diet based on some other medical problems, and that you have to work very closely with your primary doctor, with your nutritionist. That, by the way, I want for you to discuss whatever issues or changes you're going to have with your PCP, because they need to really be in the front of any changes in your nutrition. We're talking about the microbiome. It's a subject that has been very fascinating to me for a while, and have been researching quite a bit, and I have been studying this subject for a while. It's still an extremely complex issue, and still there is a lot of questions. There's still a lot of misinformation. There is still a lot of research going on. For the last 20 years, there's an explosion of research about our friendly bacteria. We have about 300 trillions of bacteria in our gut. So we suddenly realize, hey, we are being controlled by this bug, and we sometimes they are not making so much about them. Again, for the last many years, we are aware that we need to be very friendly and we need to feed them, because this is nothing new, of course. And the history of the microbiome is going back to maybe in the early 1800s, when Dr. Eli Mechnikov, they call it, he was a biologist in Russia. They later on went to France. He started to study the microbiome at that time, no more than 100 years ago. And he started to note some relation between those bugs and our longevity. And he wrote the first book, The Prolongation of Life. And he started to talk about that. And it's amazing how some people, they started to think about that. Now, we know now that that subject is extremely complex. We have what we call the second brain, our enteric nervous system, as you can see in the slide. We call that the second brain because it's about maybe 60 or 100 millions of neurons in that part of our nervous system, the ENS, that is closely related in working with our gut and our friends, the bacteria. And between our nervous system and the bacteria, there is a tremendous exchange of information that we did not realize until for the last 10 years. And not only that, but there is a tremendous exchange of information between our bacteria, our endothelium, and then our brain. It's a tremendous exchange of chemical that move from one side to another side. And we now know that our microbiome has critical roles in our mood, in our behavior, because now we know that our friendly microbiome, they are making chemical substance like GABA, like dopamine, serotonin, that help on our brain. And we thought that those things were produced in different ways, in different time, in different places, but there we are. So one of the big pathway that we have from our gut to our brain is a big nerve, the biggest nerve that we have in our brain that we call the vagus, V-A-G-U-S nerve. The vagus nerve is very well familiar to me because I have been taking care of patients with seizures in the past, and that they discovered what we call the vagus nerve stimulation unit to treat people with seizures. I used to follow a lot of people that we were stimulating that nerve. But the vagus nerve, now we know, is a big highway of information between our microbiome and our brain, in particular in people who had diseases like Parkinson and even dementia. There is a tremendous information and good things going on. And we discovered that our friend microbiome, they are making something that we call the short chain fatty acid that are very critical in our communication between our gut and our brain. This is just briefly a slide about, you can see how many interactions the gut has, the protection against pathogens, because when you have good bacteria, they keep in balance the bad bacteria, synthesis of vitamin, particularly vitamin K and vitamin B12, but also synthesis of the neurotransmitter, as I just mentioned, dopamine, serotonin, and GABA. And our immune system, we did not realize how important our microbiome is. There is a tremendous amount of T cells, which are very closely related to how our immune system reacts. So this is very critical because our immune system is very important to how we react to inflammation. And we know now that inflammation is perhaps the most important problem that causes so many neurodegenerative and degenerative diseases in our life. Promotion of circulation, promotion of fat storage, and then the production of short chain fatty acid, as I mentioned, that are so very critical for our communication with the brain, and the modulation of our central nervous system to make us be better, to behave better, to have better mood. This is not so easy, and there is always controversies. There's always a tremendous amount of studies. Some of them said, yes, this is real. And they said, no, this is not real. But we know in this current slide about the vagus nerve communication, that the production of the short chain fatty acid down there in the slide from the fibers, if the more fibers and the more healthy fibers that you have, your bacteria love that. Your chocolate, your soybean product, your beans. Those fibers are being digested by those bacteria, and they produce the acetate, all those chain fatty acid, the butyrate, and they're so critical again for many things in the metabolism of our intestine and the rest of our body. The classification of gut bacteria is extremely complicated, and I don't want it for you to be really confused on this. There's an ongoing studies, but there is two types of bacteria that are more common in our intestine, the so-called the Thermicute and the Bacteroidetes. Both bacteria, those two bacteria are the ones that make about 90% of our bacteria in our intestine. And I have mentioned some of them, what they do. And based on the Thermicute and the Bacteroidetes, they came out with the so-called Thermicute Bacteroidete ratio. And probably maybe that ratio is the most important thing that we had to look into that. Is there more Thermicute than Bacteroidete, or there's less Bacteroidete, the T, than the Thermicute? That ratio has a lot of controversy, but people think that some studies say that if you have more Thermicute, they may have a tendency to have more obesity, to have more diabetes. If you have less Bacteroidete, then they may have more problem with inflammatory inflammatory bowel disease, things like that. All those ratios keep coming back and forth in the research. But what we had to do, and we had to learn, and the most important fact is to keep a good balance and to keep our fibers on board, to keep our good nutrition on board. And there is always, again, a particular case that if you have an inflammatory bowel syndrome, or you have a severe ulcerative colitis, you have to be more careful in what type of bacteria you're going to take. Some people who take the regular bacteria as a supplement, they may end up having some issues. So we're going to be talking a little bit more on that very soon. Unfortunately, we are being exposed to many things that do not care for our microbiome. Things that destroy, damage our microbiome cause what we call dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is the imbalance of these two ratios that we were talking about, the most important one, unfortunately, is the chemotherapy. Chemotherapy with all the toxics, all the steroids that you're going through, antibiotic that you're going through, really destroy quite a bit of our microbiome. And you have to discuss that with your oncologist. You see the timing of probiotics, or what type of probiotic you may need to take to decrease that, and what type of food you need to take. And you probably will need to be under a good nutritionist when you are on the chemotherapy. And it's very complicated issues. The same that when you are taking antibiotics, when you are taking the proton pump inhibitors, such as omeprazole, in my clinic of person with cognitive problems, the significant amount, or maybe about 30 to 50% of my patients that are going to see me, they are on omeprazole. And I had to change that. I had to talk to PCP and see if there's any way, is there any way to decrease that gastric esophagitis problem? Maybe if you are eating so much orange or so much acid, maybe if you are taking some medications that might produce more acid, or maybe the omeprazole maybe change to something else. Steroids, ibuprofen, all anti-inflammatory, they also cause some changes. So there's so many other things. We know, like the metformin, for example, that you take for your diabetes, the way that metformin works, according to the new studies, is helping your microbiome. That was a welcome good news that I hear. And if you are not sleeping well, if you are not sleeping your 7 to 9 hours, if you are under stress with a significant amount of hormones, poor nutrition, that also do not take care of your microbiome. And so you had to nurture, you had to learn to love your friends there with a good balanced nutrition, plenty of fibers, food rich in flavonoids, like we were talking about the cocoa, and please, fermented food. I used to, in my little small backyard that I have about, at one point, about 20 papaya fruit. And most of the time I need to do the fermented papaya, which is super, super fermented food. If you happen to have some papayas in your backyard, you buy it. Had to be, of course, when it's still in the process of growing. So any fermented food, cabbage, the sauerkraut, the miso soup, the kimchi, all the things that are fermented, they are welcome. They are welcome for your microbiome. So what is probiotic? Okay, the probiotic is bacteria that are alive. Sometimes they are giving probiotic in liquid, like yogurt or some liquid probiotic. That sometimes they don't go through your intestine, they go through the stomach, and the stomach kill them. So you have to be very careful on liquid probiotic. So they have to be a good probiotic that passes through your stomach and go into your intestine. There's so many. One of the most common one is a probiotic that has the combination of lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. I don't know if you're able to see this, but the one that I recommend is, I don't have any stock on this, but Poor Encapsulation has one of the best probiotics that I recommend for normal people without any significant issues. So probiotic is something that is in the market for a long time, is still with some controversies. Which type of probiotic do you have to take when you are taking the probiotic with antibiotic? Do I take it at the beginning or at the end? There's still some discussion. But the best thing that you have to do when you are on antibiotic is that you have to feed your normal cells first well. and then probably to take the probiotic after you have finished the course. That is the most recent concept. What is a prebiotic? Prebiotic. Prebiotic are all those things that you do to feed your bacteria. Like for example, is chocolate a probiotic? Yes. Is veggies with a lot of fibers a probiotic? Yes. Is the fruit with all those fibers and all those flavonoids a probiotic? Yes. So all those elements are food that you incorporate in your diet to help to feed well your bacteria, we call prebiotic. And you already know what is an antibiotic. Well, we almost at the end. I hope that you're still hanging in there. This is one of my picture of my hometown, collecting our coffee. Coffee is one of the most beautiful phytonutrients that we have. I encourage you to drink your coffee. 2, maybe you can afford 3 cups of coffee, as long as you have no problems of gastritis or maybe cardiac arrhythmia. Coffee is welcome. And it's not only because the caffeine, but the coffee has so many polyphenols, has many phytonutrients that really is very helpful to you. Again, you have to take, always precaution, but the coffee is really welcome in your diet, particularly with prevention of certain diseases like Parkinson. I hope that you are hanging in there, and such a hard day. I'm ready to take my napuccino or a power nap. Thank you very much. I hope that you have enjoyed this talk, and I know that I may have had some confusion to solve all those misinformation that is there, and please try to investigate yourself and get in touch with your participant.
We thank Dr. Guido for such a wonderful presentation. If you have any questions, some more questions, you can feel free to email me or Sheila, and we'll get it to for Dr. Guido to answer. And we are going to hold doing our support group meetings in person. Right now, it's still going to continue to be Zoom.
I'd also like to invite any of those who attended the support group today, the presentation, to, if you are interested in joining our virtual exercise group, please contact Melinda and we can get you all set up with that. It's every Wednesday and Saturday. Wednesday 11 to 11:30 and Saturday 12 to 12:30. Wednesday is OT and Saturday is PT.